Hello. I'm pretty sure that some of you, at some point, have set a goal for yourselves that would deeply fulfill you once completed. When thinking about this goal, you'd probably want everything to go just your way so that the process is as easy and colorful as possible. Though, once you actually complete your goal, I'm sure most of us would want to be honest with others about how we got there. Today, we're talking about someone in the other group. The people who, even though they did what they set out to do, still fabricate more details to make their story seem much more grand than it already was. Heinrich Schliemann was a German businessman and an amateur archaeologist. Growing up the fifth of 9 children to a poor pastor, his early life would be dotted with hardships. His mother died when he was 9, which, damn. Then later on, when he was like 19, working as an apprentice at a grocer, he was lifting a barrel one day when a damn blood vessel burst in his chest, which then left him as, quote, unfit for the hard work. Damn, 1830s German work ethic, you're setting the bar a bit high for the modern day. He then took his entire savings of 30 thalers, which is like 30 ounces of silver, which, look, anyway, he walked him and his burst chesel to Hamburg in about 10 days, but couldn't hold down a job due to aforementioned burst chesel. Desperate at this point, he joins up on a ship bound for Venezuela, but wouldn't you know it, the damn thing filled with water and sank. Washing up on the Dutch coast, he then makes it to Amsterdam, whereafter he continues on with job after job after job. But this is where it all starts to turn around for Heinrich. You see, Heinrich, through being a hard worker, developed a system to help him learn any language. He claimed to be able to learn a new language in 6 weeks using this system, and would write in his diary in whatever the local language was in the country he was currently staying in. Using this system, Heinrich by the end of his life could speak English, French, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Russian, Swedish, Polish, Greek, Latin, and Arabic, and that was on top of his native German. This, back when only around 33% of Western European men were even literate, afforded Heinrich some lucrative opportunities. B.H. Schroeder and Company hired Heinrich to go to St. Petersburg as an accountant, as part of a 15-man team. So of course without a teacher he goes, okay, I guess I'll just learn Russian now, and it went so successfully while he was there, they just made him the representative of the company in St. Petersburg. He then sets up a side venture in Moscow, importing indigo, making a tidy profit because they didn't have rail lines into the city yet. He did so much business there, he was listed as a local wholesaler not even a year in. The gold rush happens in California in 1848. His brother, who made a fortune out west surveying in the California gold fields, dies in 1850. Upon hearing the news about his brother, Heinrich goes, "There's gold fields in California?" He promptly heads over there, starts a bank in Sacramento, and moves about $1 million in gold dust in under 6 months. Heinrich didn't really like it there in California, and would write in his journal about how he feared getting robbed or killed there, and would rather be sleeping soundly in his bed in St. Petersburg. So when the local Rothschild branch that he was doing business with started asking about discrepancies in the gold dust consignments, he mysteriously called a case of the sniffles and hightailed it back to Russia. He also claims to have met Millard Fillmore and his wife while in the United States, but that probably didn't happen. He also claims to have witnessed the San Francisco fire of 1851, but no, he didn't. He wrote in his journal that it happened a month after it actually did. And by now you're probably starting to see that despite all his success and everything he's done with his life, it wasn't ever enough. His life story could always use a bit more polish. He marries a rich girl after getting back to St. Petersburg, and after getting even richer, moving more indigo, and later saltpeter during the Crimean War, sells off the whole business and was now 36 and rich enough to retire. But you see, there was a fire burning in old Heinrich's soul. Back in the age of 7, being a fan of ancient Greek history and mythology after being gifted a book on the subject, Heinrich declared that he would one day find the ancient city of Troy. This passion never really left Heinrich, and actually only grew stronger when a drunken miller who worked with him at the same grocer as a teen would recite the works of Homer, and he would buy the man drinks to hear more. Now that he was a rich man with plenty of free time on his hands, he could finally pursue that dream. There was a bit of a problem, though. Bear in mind, we're at the 1870s at this point. Archaeology is still pretty much, hey, let's just dig big-ass trenches and look at all the stuff we find on the way down. And also remember, Heinrich is a businessman, not an archaeologist, so he's more concerned with looking good more than being correct. He wasn't just looking for Troy, he was going to find it, come hell or high water, or in this case, big-ass trenches. Heinrich came upon the Turkish site of Hisarlik after getting word from another amateur archaeologist whose brother owned the land it sat on. Heinrich knew well enough to know that what he was looking at was a tell, or an artificial hill where people just kept building cities on top of each other, but it was carved into his mind, like the land he was about to carve into, that Troy was going to have to be on the bottom layer. All those cities in the way? Hogwash, clear it out. And so it was. Clearing away a good top layer of the hill and digging a trench straight down into the middle, he hits a fortified citadel. Now, here's where it gets real jumbled, because while modern archaeologists agree that he did unearth Troy, they're also debating whether or not Heinrich was a groundbreaking archaeologist, or just a guy who got really, really lucky and maybe a bit loose with the facts. He didn't just find a city, he found 9 cities, one buried under the other. We know them today as Troy 1 through 9, with 1 being the oldest at the bottom, and 9 being the latest at the top. But here's where Heinrich's businessman brain maybe got the better of his archaeologist brain. He was so eager to find the Troy of the Trojan War, to be the hero of his own Greek epic, that he might have taken a few creative liberties with his dig. When he hit the bottom, he secretly noted that this layer was way too small to be able to withstand the 10-year siege that Homer described. That didn't stop him from telling the world that he found Homer's Troy. The artifacts down in the Troy 2 level was later found to be far too old to be from the Trojan War. Not only that, but it looks like they weren't even Greek, which kind of argues against his point that this was the level of Troy where the Greeks fought the Trojans. He claimed to have found the treasures for what he called the Burnt City, including what he called Priam's treasure, after the last Trojan king Priam, also down in level 2. We now know that King Priam's Troy was on level 7, so that's just wrong. He claims that on the very last days of the dig, he and his wife were down at level 2, and he was carving away at a wall with a knife when he saw the treasure. Gold and silver cups, tiaras, earrings, bronze weapons, and implements aplenty. And, not caring about his own safety, he frantically kept carving away at the wall until they could get to it, which his wife then carried away in a shawl. In private, though, he admitted that his wife had already left the country due to her father's death, and he only said she helped in order to boost her confidence to get her to help out more next time. Modern archaeologists all pretty much agree that in his haste to get down to the bottom level, he kind of destroyed the level of Troy that he was looking for. That big-ass trench ran north to south through the whole mound, a trench still known today as Schlieman's Trench. His methods were, quote, savage and brutal. Entire walls were ground down, and a bunch of artifacts were blasted away with actual battering rams trying to get down to bedrock. Now, as much crap as we give him today over it, remember, it's still the 1870s, and we still hardly knew anything about the best way to preserve a dig when excavating. Some go as far to say that there was no better digger than Heinrich, who was actually out there in the field at the time. Eventually, he came to accept that the layer he found Priam's treasure in was around 1,000 years removed from the Trojan War, which must have made him realize what he had done to the actual site he was trying to find. Probably punishment enough, right? After that first dig trip wrapped up, the Turkish government sued Heinrich for 10,000 francs, so in order to assure that he'd be allowed back to try again for his second dig, he sent them back 50,000 for good measure. Yes, there really was no problem Heinrich couldn't solve by just throwing money at it. He even bought a place in Indiana to take advantage of their liberal divorce laws. As part of the divorce, he stated he was living in the United States and wished to continue living in Indiana, but the second the divorce was final, he was on the first plane back to Athens and married again 2 months later. Oh, Heinrich, you rascal. Inside his mansion today lies the Numismatic Museum of Athens. Its collection is said to parallel that of the British Museum in London or La Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. In it lies 500,000 coins, gems, metals, and other related artifacts from 1400 BC to modern times. There's also a library of around 12,000 books and a conservation laboratory. I'm kind of torn on Heinrich. On the one hand, he pretty much accomplished what he set out to do, but on the other hand, he just couldn't help but add on all these lies left and right to make his story sound more grand than it actually was. It wasn't enough that he found Troy, he had to find the connection with the Greeks. It wasn't enough that he found a vast treasure, he had to attribute that treasure to a king who wouldn't rule there for another millennia. It was his moment in the spotlight, and he found that there wasn't enough oohs and ahs. Plus, he also destroyed a good chunk of the city. So let that be a lesson to you all, that achieving your goals doesn't need to be a public spectacle, and it's more important that you take the time to do things right. Otherwise, people without anything better to do, like me, will comb through all the claims you've ever made and make a crappy edutainment video about it. Well, thanks for being with me again today.